welcome back. My guest is a editor-in-chief of Media Post International. He's a journalist, a media consultant, an author, rights activist, a social crusader, public affairs analyst, and an OAP. Idroyena Kwaiswa. Welcome to Political Spectrum on Spectrum Television. I can barely make out what you're saying. I can't hear you clearly. Okay, if you can boost the volume of your device a little bit, it will help us out. But I think you can hear me clearly. So I'm going to start with your assessment of the general. You've had all of the reports about some places being calm and peaceful, while some other places sadly have degenerated to chaos. What's your take on how day one of these protests has been like?
Very poor government policies. The country is witnessing this level of poverty. So it is very unfortunate whether the protest succeeded in some part of the country and not the other. It has made a very bold statement that things are not working properly in Nigeria. So I think that is what everyone of us should concern about. Then the question is, how do we get to where we are? There's been this issue that...
Okay, Mr. Kwaiswa, I can barely make out what you're saying. I think we're having a little issue from your end. So we just, I think you should just put that together. We'll come back to you. Okay, while I was trying to hear him, he was trying to paint a picture of how we got here. Talking about the what led to this, and talking about the unprecedented hunger. If I could barely make out what he was saying, the unprecedented hunger that led to this. People have tagged this protest a hunger protest. People are hungry. But then, when you're looking at 80 million plus extremely poor people in Nigeria, more than 100 million people who are in some sort of distress or the other, and looking at this play out in this very challenging economic situation. They say the hungry man is an angry man. So maybe that's how we got here. But I'm thinking that we could have averted this in more than one way, many ways. And when I looked at the NLC action, the NLC and TUC strike, I remember on more than one occasion having interaction with some representative of Labour. I kept asking, why wouldn't we look at this as an opportunity to tackle the general symptoms that have brought us here, or rather the proper issues that have brought us here, rather than pick the issue of pay alone? Because again, when you look at it, Labour represents about maybe 1 to 3% of the Nigerian population. So, okay, Labour had a good deal, some would say, with the government. And those who are unemployed, those who are in the street, they didn't have a good deal. So maybe this is them also trying to get the government to cater to their needs. So that's where we are. And that's what I think, Mr. Kwaiswa is back I think his set is in order now. Mr. Kwesa, welcome back.
Thank you very much.
Oh, good, great. So now, okay, before we go back to that question, you were in Uyo yesterday.
Yes.
Okay, wait. How did you observe the protests in Uyo compared with other parts of the country?
What I would like to say, Uyo was relatively peaceful. People were not out on the street protesting. And what could have been responsible for that is that the police in Uyo, in Akwa Ibom State, restricted those who were supposed to protest to one of these parks, the
Unity Park
village.
The Unity Park.
Normally have the Christmas village. Yeah, Unity Park, rather, Unity Park. And that was against the earlier announcement that those who intend to protest will gather at the water fountain. It was still the same antics in other states where protesters were restricted to a confined location. And so a lot of people who wanted to go out there were somewhat discouraged. And so that accounted for no turnout of people in that area. And so it was a situation where we protest at home. And so I'm saying that irrespective of that, or no street protests in Akwa Ibom State, in other parts of Nigeria, that is not an indication that people were not protesting. Because the issues that triggered these protests is something that is still very much with the people.
Then again, let me pick you up on that point. Some would say that, for instance, Akwa Ibom, when you take a look at some of going back as far as 2012, what was the involvement of the Akwa Ibom people in the 2012 demonstration, which was the governments like to want to pattern this to 2020 protests, but I think that's a false equivalence in some way, because the issue in 2020 was more about police brutality, but in 2012 there was more about this hardship occasioned by government policy, particularly with regards to the pooling of subsidies. So, but when you look at it, back at 2012, what was Akwa Ibom like when people were protesting? And I'm saying that to also highlight that certain states, like the southeastern states, took a decision, apparently, not to be involved. The Ohanese Igbo came out to say they are not in support of it. Many state governors in the east came out. Are we looking at Akwa Ibom as playing in that regard, or was it just something that, like you alluded to, that had to do with the change of the venue, or maybe the rain?
Well, you need to understand that the 2012 event, the EndSARS protest that you are referring to, was a protest against perverse police practices. It wasn't a protest against a general state of hunger. And so those who were affected, who felt aggrieved during the 2012 exercise, were mostly people who suffered some level of brutality from the police. They were only getting sympathy from the other members of the public to address that situation. But in the current situation, you are talking about high cost of food items, not food scarcity, but high cost of food items that has affected a cross section of the members of the public. And so the audience will not be the same.
Okay.
Now, a lot of persons would have loved to step out there for the protest, but there was also the fear of the security of life because of the way the police, the security agencies were giving out threats. warning people don't come out and all of that. And the state government and the federal government employed to discourage people. Some of those antics were psychological, like you mentioned the Southeast. The Southeast, you could remember the deputy House of Representative Speaker.
The Speaker of the House
of Representatives.
Okay.
Specifically sent out a message to the Southeasterners, warning them that their blood will be spilled. So it was more or less a psychological issue. It's not that you don't have issues of hunger in the Southeast, but something of a psychological warfare was deployed to dissuade people from stepping out. And the fear was, you may not actually understand what the security agencies are waiting in the wings to do. Don't put your life on the line. It doesn't mean that there is no hunger in the Southeast. It doesn't also mean that there is no hunger in Akwa Ibom, where people did not go out to protest. It doesn't also mean that there is too much hunger in Borno, where you had issues of bomb blast. In the issue of Borno, understand that it is an area that is already vested with a high level of insecurity. And when you talk about the issue of bomb blast, it is a recurrent event in Borno State. And so those who are perpetrating it simply catch on the situation to have a large number of people to detonate the device. So,
but therein lies that issue, because the government, the federal government, and most of the state governors too, and security chief came out to give that security report, saying that, look, whether we like it or not, this Nigerian security architecture has been overstretched, trying to deal with various security challenges across the board. And that occasioned, I would say, the government coming out to say, look, we understand what you're saying. We may not, okay, let me not, I'm not speaking for them, but they came out to say, okay, we understand that people are hungry. We understand, we see the problem. We are trying to fix it. But don't embark on this, because this will be hijacked. They kept saying that this will be hijacked. And apparently, that's what has played out in Sokoto, in Katsina, in Kano, in Borno. Of course, like you rightly said, we had an existing security challenge there. So perhaps, maybe the federal government had some sense in asking that there should be a stay of this protest.
Well, let me say this. You know, government will always have a way of explaining its actions. Understand that there were certain things, or certain triggers, certain indications that government would intervene at a certain point. How do you look at a situation where the government said that they have intelligence information that people would disrupt the protest, infiltrate? But you have people who openly say they are going to protest for government against those who were protesting against the rising cost of food items in Nigeria. And government did not say anything about those people. Take, for instance, what happened in, was it Abuja? Where
Abuja.
Yeah, it was two groups confined to a particular location.
Then people were busting under police escort.
Yes. And so it didn't show any sign of some sort of something that is people who are that liberal, who are not biased. And so when you also tell protesters, don't come out, and went as far as getting court judgment, it was already a clear indication that by the time you step out of the bounds of the environment within which you were confined, you are simply going to be, attract police action. So already the stage was set. Remain either in a confined environment. The moment you start procession on the road, the police will intervene. So the atmosphere was already set for that. But in a situation where you would have allowed the protesters to go on protest and then you provide security coverage, the situation would not have been the same. So already the atmosphere was charged to enable the police to intervene whenever the protesters are out of the environment within which they were confined.
But one would also
exactly the situation.
One would also say that maybe the security agents looked at the resources that was available to them and they saw that there was no way they could protect protesters, which they all agreed had a right to protest. And that was maybe, I'm not holding brief for them, but perhaps that may have occasioned that thinking. Let's have some designated areas where people can protest, carry out their constitutional right to protest, but then we can also provide security around those areas. Could that have been the case? Or was it, like you said, something more amenable to having control over people, so that, like in Abuja, for instance, they were supposed to go to the Moshood Abiola stadium, and if the commissioners, ministers even came to ask them to go inside, they said, no, we'd rather stay outside. But at some point, what happened.
No, remember in the case of the Moshood Abiola Stadium that you are talking about, two groups were there. One that were for the protest, the other group that was against. And so how do you put two groups or two opposing groups in a particular location to protest? Tell the other one protest to the right, this other one protest to the left. It was after those who were actually in support of the protest against end bad government discovered that the stadium was also occupied by some other faction that they stepped out, and they were confronted along the Eagle Square axis, and that was what caused the release of tear gas canisters that has been reported. And so I'm simply saying that if the police actually wanted to provide coverage, the protesters would have been allowed to go on their peaceful protest on the road, and then you provide coverage. When you talk about protecting somebody, it's like having a protector in the house. A protector can protect you from going out. It can also protect some other person from falling in. So when police said they would give him police protection, it could have also been a protection not to proceed, or protection to go out peacefully. So from the statements already released by the police authorities, they were against street protest. And so whosoever attempted to do that was not simply working in line with the thinking of the authorities. And definitely certain things have been done to stop such activity. So that is what is going on. But the message is, irrespective of whether people did the procession on the street or not, the federal government will need to understand that there is high cost of living in Nigeria. And that it should not just be an issue of giving palliative, that we need actions that are concrete enough to address the biting economic realities. And one of such is a reduction of the high cost of transportation occasioned by the high cost of petroleum products. So we need our refineries to be fixed. We need to refine petroleum products locally here in Nigeria, and then ensure that the economy is stabilized. I completely like what the federal government did a few days ago, ordering that crude oil should be sold to Dangote in Naira. It's a welcome development. You remember when the Russian-Ukraine war started, and the United States started filing sanctions against Russia. They insisted that if we are going to buy our gas, we are buying it with their local currency. They were simply doing that to protect its local currency. So I'm also thinking that in this situation, the federal government should look for a way of selling crude oil, not just to local refineries, but others in Naira, to boost the value of Naira, the currency. And then over these last few months, you've seen the central bank come up with so many policies, monetary policies, to try to strengthen the value of the Naira. It is not working because there is no backup. It's not, resting on any sustainable framework. The exchange rate will depend on both the fiscal policy and the economic policy. The fiscal policies are not right, so there should be intentional effort to fix the fiscal policies while also tinkering with the economic policies. Until those two policies align, you're not going to have a stability. So the federal government will need to be intentional. I was expecting that as part of activities to show commitment of the federal government to addressing these issues. Nothing would have stopped the president from visiting any of these refineries that they say is going on turnaround maintenance, to see the state of activities there and maybe give marching orders. Let it be that, let Nigerians see that the president in particular is taking concrete and decisive steps to bring back the economy on it. It shouldn't just end with directive and all of those. We need to see that concrete steps, that seriousness in his approach to fixing those things that are wrong.
Mr. Kwaswa, now you raised the president, and in all of this, the build up to this, we saw a situation where ministers came out to brief the country. He had Minister for Information, he had the Secretary to the Federation of Secretary to the Government of the Federation, George Akume. We had the Minister of Information, we had Minister of Economy. How did all of these ministers come out to address the country, trying to persuade people to stay off the protests? But then again, where is the president? The president has not yet addressed the country. I would have thought that the president should come and address the country.
Yes, I completely share that sentiment. That is part of why I'm saying that we need pragmatic action. The buck stops on the president's table. And I want to believe that if the president addresses the nation, and then a lot of persons will certainly take him more seriously than second-hand information from ministers who are not actually in control of certain things within the economic sector. So, like I said, beyond the issue of the address is time is long overdue. I expected that before now, that will come into force, but we've not seen that happen. It is still not late. The president can and should address the nation, telling the citizens pinpointedly what he is doing to address the crisis that we are facing as a nation. And like I said earlier, giving a marching order directive, this should be done is one thing. It will go a long way of telling the citizens how serious Mr. President is. If tomorrow morning or within this weekend or next week early, the president visits any of these moribund refineries and then see the state of affairs there and further give directive on the spot. And there is nothing also wrong with restructuring if those who are in that sector are not giving us what we are looking for. Let it not appear as if there are areas that the president has interest or there are sacred cows that some people who are appearing to behave as if they've captured Nigeria. Nothing could be done about rescuing Nigeria from them. Certain drastic action needs to be taken to ensure that we don't have a situation where few persons continue to keep the nation in captivity, in economic captivity, while the others are suffering.
While you were having that challenge with your audio, my monologue, I said something. I want to bring it back to you. Did we miss an opportunity when the NLC and the TUC embarked upon their strike demanding for better pay? Because take a look at them, they would represent, say, between 1.5 to 3-point-something% of the Nigerian population. And maybe if they had pushed in the direction of what this particular end bad governance movement is pushing now, maybe would have actually used it, but you would have been better organized, I would say, and would have maybe not had this violent occurrence that we have seen. Did we miss an opportunity? Did the NLC look more for themselves than for the country?
Well, first and foremost, you need to understand that NLC and TUC are trade unions. They were solely formed for the purposes of defending the interests of...
I totally agree with you. But we've had across the country, across the world, situations where the NLC or the trade unions generally have been part of the public mobility that have caused significant change in governance with social effects. So across the world, Poland, South Africa, all of NLC, this started out as trade organizations themselves.
Yes, I was coming to that. I needed to lay that foundation.
Okay.
That NLC is a trade union. But beyond that, members of the NLC live in the larger society. And that is why I have said this in so many forums that it is not the issue of the amount of money that workers are being paid, but the value of the money that they will get at the end of the day. Because even if NLC and TUC were successful in getting 516 or whatever naira that they demanded, the high inflation rate in Nigeria would make a mincemeat of that money. So, as part and parcel of the society suffering this rising cost of food product, members of the NLC and the TUC are also duty bound as Nigerians to have demanded for what we are asking for now. But also remember that they made their attempts and they were labeled as people who were sponsored by certain political actors to derail the government. And so I believe that in as much as they did not do that holistically, those issues were also mentioned. And I remember in one of the very last meetings that they had with Mr. President, he told them he's doing so many other things to ensure that not just salary increase, but that there are better living conditions for all Nigerians. How far that statement is being put to use is what I'm still wondering as we're speaking. So the NLC and the TUC and other labor centers also have a responsibility. But we don't always need to wait until the struggle comes from those centers. Nigerians are suffering, and that was why Nigerians decided to, hit the street to register their protest over what is happening. And I also believe that members of the trade unions were part and parcel of those who I did not actually hear NLC and TUC in particular say don't embark on strike. They did not also say they are not going to participate. But it is because of the way things have been managed, and maybe the fear of the fact that there are going to be so much bloodbath that some people have not really stepped out there to register their participation. But I'm simply saying, whether NLC or TUC or other Nigerians were out on the streets to protest or not, a statement has been made. The federal government needs to understand that there is a very serious economic upheaval in Nigeria, that the cost of living is high. People are hungry. There is high cost of transportation. Electricity bill is very high. Life is becoming unbearable. And so policies and programs should be put in place intentionally to address these issues. Let us not wait until people hit the street to start destroying life and property. The government should pay attention. Government should be proactive, going henceforth to addressing this issue, so that if Nigeria is better, if Nigeria is peaceful, it is in the best interest of all. After all, as we speak, if the federal government and the state governments wants to count what they've used to suppress the strike, volume is enormous, because a lot of things were put in place, resources, human beings, and even the deployment of the security forces. All those things require money that could have been channeled effectively to more better use. So the federal government, the state government should not wait until there is uprising for them to do what they're supposed to do. It is time that step up their game, review their policies that are not working, and do things that are right to put the economy back on track.
Okay, Mr. Iroina Kwaiswa, of course, we are talking generally on the state of the country, looking at the protests, the end bad governance protest. But I'd like us to take a listen to what the Inspector General of Police said last night. Inspector General of Police Kayode Egbochukwu, who made an address last night. Let's take a listen to some of the things that he said and see how we can propel our conversation forward. Okay, that's taking a little long to bring up. But then again,
while you... It is with grave sense of responsibility that I address you this evening. You will recall that upon several indications by various groups of their intent to commence a nationwide protest on 1st August 2024, we rolled out several warnings based on actionable intelligence at our disposal, indicating that some groups were mobilizing for violent protest, while some groups claiming to be mobilizing for peaceful protest were doing so with violent undertones, refusing to cooperate with the police on measures to be taken to guarantee peaceful protest. On the basis of this intelligence, the police advised that the protest to be shelved at this instant. Where the organizers insisted on going on with the protest, they were advised to stage the protest in confined locations. This would have enabled the police provide adequate protection for the protesters and isolate the criminals whose intention was to loot and destroy in the name of a protest. This we were doing in furtherance of our duty to protect lives and property and maintaining law and order. While we affirm the constitutional rights of citizens to assemble and express their views on issues of national importance, we were wary about the dangers posed by agitation instigated by some individuals who have shown tendencies to be disloyal to the government of the day. Despite our suspicions, we showed good faith through professional conduct by providing security at strategic locations, all aimed at ensuring peaceful conduct during the protest, as the promoters pledged. Our men, deployed nationwide, went out with a clear brief to ensure that no one is unnecessarily harassed or intimidated. In places where there were court orders, we gave instructions for observance of same. Regrettably, events in some major cities today showed that what was being instigated was mass uprising and looting, not protest. Those who were in the forefront of promoting the idea of the protest were not around to lead it. Hoodlums have been let loose on innocent Nigerians and their hard-earned businesses and property looted and destroyed. The motive of the rioters was basically two: loot and destroy both private and government property. The destruction so far has been mind-boggling. There has been destruction in Kano, Borno, Yobe, Kaduna, Gombe, Bauchi, FCT, Abuja, Niger, and Jigawa. Police stations have been destroyed. There have been attempts to take over government houses, looting of government infrastructures. Several warehouses and shops so far have been looted and in several instances completely destroyed. In spite of the refusal of the protesters, for instance in FCT, to adhere to a court order requesting that protests in Abuja should be at the National Stadium, they trooped into the streets, and yet...
Okay, that was the IGP of police there giving a rundown of what played out. Mr. Drain, you still with us, right? You took a listen to what he was saying. Now, my question is, when you hear the passionate expression of the IGP saying we did our best, we believed in the right of citizens to protest, but then like we won, this has been hijacked. Hoodlum took over this and created chaos, particularly across the north. When you hear this, how do we now approach? Because again, we really don't have the latest facts with how the protest is ongoing across the country. Of course, we're going to have taken more reports. But when next time some other organization comes out and then says we want to have this kind of protest, and then government pushes back, wouldn't they have justification in doing that, particularly when it comes to safeguarding life and property?
Well, I've listened to the IGP. Also made claim that some police officers was it wounded?
Yeah, what?
But he has not told us the location.
What? He said one was murdered. One was murdered.
Murdered, yeah. He has not told us the location where police officers were murdered. And so that is a rather generic statement. He has mentioned issues that crop up in the Kano and all of those places. Now this is what still goes back to what I said. The police and the government have acknowledged the fact that citizens have the right to peaceful protest. But oftentimes, in the course of attempting to intervene to ensure that this protest will not actually go on, it is usually infiltrated, because you would expect the police to start, releasing or shooting tear gas when it doesn't appear as if there are problems. So that is why the issue of infiltration is always there. And good enough, the IGP said they had intelligence of people who were supposed to, who planned to disrupt the protest. What would their police have done? If you have intelligence, the intelligence should also be able to have told you who were responsible for this. So it would have been the duty of the security agencies to ensure that those people were stopped from even coming out, so that those who had genuine intentions to go out there will go out there without this infiltration. Or what we would have done would have been to provide coverage. The issue of coverage is, if people are given you a location that they are going to gather, and what you do is allow some police officers in front and then keep some at the back to provide coverage, so that the line will not be infiltrated. And if you really had wanted to do that, that would have been done. For instance, like what happened in I didn't know that we had that number of police officers in the Bible State. The people that were out yesterday in Uyo were mainly police officers. They were everywhere. I don't know whether they were withdrawn from some of these positions, because most of them have like drug loads.
But then again, you see that that's what I was also talking about. Because for you to have this kind of protest and have proper coverage, sometimes there would be need to pull some security agents from their other responsibilities, and that would also open the system up for some sort of attack, I would say.
Like what responsibility? Everywhere in Nigeria, in almost all the states of the Federation, you had police presence. And so the question would have rather been, where are these police on ordinary days when we don't have protests? Where are they always kept?
That's what I'm saying.
You have this number of police.
That's what I'm saying. They have other designated places where they take, they have responsibility of watch.
No, most of them are assigned to political office holders. And so, as ordinary citizens, you may not even have the access. So they were withdrawn that yesterday for general duties.
Well, that's an allegation. We are not too sure of that.
The issue is, where are we been keeping this number of police officers like the one I saw in Uyo almost everywhere? Where have they been in ordinary days? So, and if you have this number of officers across the Federation scattered about, how come we are having all these security issues? So the issue is that as a country, we have the resources to offer better security for our citizens. But in most cases, these resources are not properly applied. So agree that the police have that responsibility to ensure that there is protection of life and property.
Okay, now talking about sorry to interrupt you there. Talking about, let's move this conversation a little further. Reports have come out that the FCT minister alleges that some senator or some lawmaker is somewhere implicit in these protests, organizing, and it's adding that supporting the protesters, and said that may be some form of opposition, allegedly. So, but then when you look at even the government, not just the government, some other political players have come out to even accuse Peter Obi, the Labour Party presidential aspirant in the 2023 election, has been one of the organizers and sponsors of this. Then you're having the PDP also coming out to take hits or knocks against the ruling APC, saying that their bad policies are responsible for this. Now, let me take you again back to 2012, because we had something like this played out, and then the government of the day, then PDP, led by former President Goodluck Jonathan, and the government said it was the opposition. Then our President Bola Tinubu was in the opposition, said it was him and Buhari, and all of these people were involved in that protest. So my question now would be, how do we separate the political talk from the real substance-based issues? Or because the politician says it, should we throw it away? Or does that just mean that because the politician comes out to air his own opinion, for instance, an opposition politician, that he hates the government? How do we reconcile this?
Well, when I listen to most of those things, they are all sometimes laughable. I'm not saying that some people who have political interests cannot also instigate violence against a sitting government. And it's also, even if when that exists, does not also mean that people who are genuinely aggrieved about policies of government should not make requests or ask certain questions. But, the politicians, anytime somebody is in this leadership saddle and certain things are done, maybe to draw his attention to certain lapses, the first point of accusation will be that is sponsored by political enemies, without actually looking at the issues whether they are merit. So it is one form of distraction. But let me also say that, like what Nyesom Wike, the FCT minister, said, it's laughable. When he said that a particular senator is giving support, he went further to mention the support was providing food. That's what he said, was providing food. And the people who went out yesterday to protest were people who said they were hungry. and so if people say they were hungry and somebody was providing food, what is a crime? Is it not in a way actually trying to calm down the people who were hungry and telling them, take food, don't be violent, because an angry man is a hungry man. So
we saw reports that in Rivers State, Governor Fubara offered something for pure water, and the people rejected it.
Okay. So was he aware? Assisting the protesters to protest? So those are some of those issues that for me were becoming laughable. And I'm simply saying that anytime issues like these are raised, we should look at it from the point of merit. Are there substance in the complaints that Nigerians are making regarding the state of affairs of the country? If there are, it doesn't matter who raised the concerns. It doesn't matter whether it's from the opposition or not. If whatsoever is said are things that are in existence, things that are bordering the generality of the people, attention should be paid to addressing those issues, rather than, try to bring a political coloration to whittle it down. The issue is whether it is said from the opposition camp that there is hardship in Nigeria, or from people in government. Even the people in government, the federal government itself has acknowledged that there is hardship. So whether it is said by the opposition, the reality is there, that there is hardship, there is high cost of living in Nigeria. And so it is duty bound on government to address the issue, that the substance and not the shadows.
Okay, in Rivers State, like I said, we had the former minister for youth and sport, Dalong, and the popular pastor El Buba leading in Jos. That protest was somewhat peaceful, really, and compared to other parts of the north. When you see a cleric and particularly one would even say this was a politician under Buhari, where one would say a lot of at least the Tinubu administration would say that they inherited a very precarious situation. And whether they like it or not, that statement would connote that the previous administration had some very, I would say, wrongdoing in how they managed the economy. So when you have someone like Solomon Dalong come out to lead the protest, which one would say stems from some of the policies that his own government in his time implemented, and we're seeing the fruit. And you're also seeing Prophet Issa Buba coming out to be part of that. By the way, there was also a great show of unity among the Christians and the Muslims, to the point where when the Muslims were praying, it was the Christians that stood guard for them to pray and then continue with the protest. So what do you make of that?
Well, it is simply leadership approach. Like what you said, let me even take you back to what happened in Edo State, where there was a protest in Edo State. I hope you understand. And the governor came out there
and addressed
and met with the protesters.
Yes, yes.
And addressed them. We've not heard of any ugly incidents in Edo State because the people were not restricted. They simply went out there on a protest, and then the governor was out there to restrict them. They submitted their petition, and it was taken. And I want to believe that, to a certain extent, the violence that we've noticed in some of these states emanates from the way the government perceived this protest and the way the strategies they devised to frustrate the entire activity. So, if I had said initially that I would have expected police coverage rather than protection. If the police were that open-minded to say, okay, let's give the protesters coverage, and then warn all those who may come to disrupt the protest, and allow the protesters to maybe march to government house and then submit their petition, we wouldn't have had this issue. Or give them a location. The governor is coming to a certain location to meet with you, so that you could present your request.
Well, we do not know about the governors coming to address them, but we, of course, had that was an entirely different issue of restricting the protest to a particular geographical location. Again, one would say, I'm still not holding brief for the Nigerian state or the police, but when you look at the Nigerian police, we have already agreed that the Nigerian security forces are not adequate to generally give us protection, even on a normal day. On a normal day, the ratio of policemen to the population is one among some of the lowest in the world. That's one of the clamorings for state policing, which would allow the states to also get more hands to help out. So on a normal day, and then we have a situation where you have to give coverage. I'm saying that perhaps there was a possibility that even if the police in good faith would have wanted to do that, they would probably not be capable of doing that in the reality of when things play out. And we saw that play out especially in the north. So in some places we've seen police give coverage. In some other places, questionable what their intent or maybe their tactics, maybe was not the motive, maybe a poor tactics that they employed. We can all, have our say on that. But again, that's the point I'm trying to make. But you rightly pointed out that yes, generally when we have protests like this, protesters have a grievance. They have a message they want to deliver. And they want to be able to deliver that message to an authority figure. And in this setup, there was that, I don't know, it wasn't so keyed in, because normally if we are looking at Abuja, for instance, we would have expected somebody to come and receive them and have some talk, and then their address is handed over, just like you pointed out was done in Edo State. So let's try to distinguish between that.
Well, security management is not normally done using one strategy, like you pointed out. Depending on the situation and the scenario, you could adopt the best security approach to handle situations. But like we noticed in Edo State, that the protesters went peacefully up on the streets. They were received by the state government, or the state government rather, and they were able to present their grievances peacefully. And then they went back peacefully. No life was lost, because the police there, because of the disposition of the governor, was not out to disrupt the protest. Of those who had intention of disrupting the process, that was why the protesters were restricted to a particular location. And by the time you leave the location that was allotted for the protest, you are actually contravening the existing order. So there's going to be resistance from the security forces. So initially they were not out. It was a security strategy not to allow protest, a procession. So if people violate or disobey that, it is going to incur the right of the police authorities, because they were not prepared for that. But if actually they were prepared to give coverage, they would have also made adequate arrangement to cover that. So it is a matter of the strategy that was adapted at initial. It's not that for lack of personnel or lack of capacity. So that is exactly what I want to address that issue. But be that as it may, whether they were disruptions or not, I still want us to understand that a statement has been made. And we don't need to allow these statements to remain, too long before it is addressed. Because the protest may have failed this time around because government was given this long notice. Before now, this thing had been on the social media, the preparations. A particular date was picked, that was yesterday. And people were preparing for it. Even the government agencies and the security apparatus work towards ensuring that they frustrate that effort yesterday. But remember what happened during the Arab Spring. If something spontaneous happens, I'm not praying for it, and then it becomes something that the reaction is spontaneous, it is not going to be as we witnessed. So government should take advantage of the gap that has been created by this exercise and address the concerns of the people so that we won't have any issue tomorrow rather, that will force people to take action spontaneously without actually waiting to be mobilized.
Okay.
I'm thinking that the biting economic realities in Nigeria is getting to a boiling point. And the sooner the government takes proper action to address these issues, the better for us as a people. We've had time, this long number of time, almost 2 weeks, to strategize. These people who were on the social media agitating for the strike were giving out notices and all of those things. And so the government and the security agencies also had time to prepare. This other one may have been, they may be partially success to, frustrate the strike or the protest, may be partial. I'm looking at a situation where at the end of this exercise, after this period, nothing concrete is done. And maybe something very little that will trigger another public outburst. And then you may not also have the time in the world maybe to go to court to get a court order barring people from not coming out or restricting people to a particular location.
Well,
the message has been passed.
Yeah. Let's pray against that and hope that the government have taken notice, and then the things that have led us to this place will be addressed. We are out of time. We are out of time, Mr.
When I raised the issue, when I raised the issue, I was not saying it's going to happen. I was simply saying let's avoid it from happening. Yeah.
I agree with you. Let's leave it there. Edwina Kwaiswa is the editor-in-chief, Media Post International, a journalist, media consultant, author, right activist, social crusader, a public affairs analyst at OAP. Thank you very much for joining us. And this is where we're going to hang it. We're out of time. Of course, we're going to continue to monitor the development. Political Spectrum returns on Monday. It's Ifyok Omoika. Do enjoy the rest of your day, but make sure that you are safe whatever you do in carrying out your constitutional responsibility and right of public protest. Please do it within the ambit of the law and make sure that you do not cause harm and be safe. Thank you for staying with us.
Thank you for having me.